Hello, Bengals fans. I am Matt Minnick. Joining me, as always, is John Sheeran. Anthony Cosenza will be with us a little bit later. This is the Cincy Jungle pregame tailgate brought to you by our good friends in Narragansett. So, hey, let's start with last week. We were just talking about how it was a crazy week with the holidays and everything. I don't, we didn't produce quite as much content as we sometimes do, and the stuff that was out there, a lot of you probably missed because you're out seeing family and doing things like that. But Bengals got a win last week. That was pretty cool. Uh, what are your Joe? What kind of takeaways? What can you take away from that game?
I don't think anyone's ever seen Ben Roethlisberger that bad, especially against the Bengals and especially at Paul Brown Stadium. It's an atmosphere that he has always at least been serviceable. But it was the perfect opportunity for the Bengals to get a win out of this. And the week prior they had 3 fumbles in the first half against the Dallas Cowboys, and that game got away from them. This game they turned the ball over 3 times and they won by 10. And it was unlike anything that I've personally ever seen. I know that some people have said, this physicality was there when Burfict was there, but from like a team-wide standpoint, I don't think I've ever seen them just bully and dominate that team, especially in this atmosphere before. I know they beat the Steelers on Monday Night Football back in 2013, which was also when Giovanni Bernard had a rushing and a receiving touchdown. But I mean, the game was unique. It was completely unexpected, and honestly, and I talked about this on Wednesday. It just seemed like they just embodied that, fuck the world. We're the biggest underdogs in the world, and we're just going to go out there and just embody that. And it will be interesting to see how they kind of carry that over into this week, where it's just the Texans. It's not the Steelers. How much of that fire and mentality is going to actually carry over into another week.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, now looking at this Texans game, you've got a team that's right, they're picking around the same spot this upcoming year. Actually, draft implications on this game, that if the Bengals win this, the Texans would be one of probably more than one team that would move in front of them in the draft order. Potentially, as they're sitting there with 4 wins. Obviously, they didn't even really have a GM. They fired their head coach early in the season. They have interviewed Marvin Lewis. And Jim Caldwell as well. Marvin Lewis obviously stands out on that list. I mean, they're really looking to lame duck. I mean, Romeo Crennel. It's kind of funny because they're interviewing these guys that are available that have head coaching experience, and Lewis and Caldwell. Crennel has head coaching experience as well. They're not talking to him though. He's just finished out the year with them. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting to look at it, from that perspective. There's definitely not that sense of, nobody thinks we can do it going into this game. However, there are some big factors here. Winning 2 games in a row. Got to figure out how to do that at some point. Winning on the road. So this is one that has. There are some boxes you could check off. And really, these are very minimalist boxes. It's not like, yes, Zac Taylor's the guy. He won on the road against the Texans and Romeo Crennel. Like, it's definitely not like that, but at least it's something. At least you're not going to the next September saying, man, I hope we can win a game on the road at some point. So yeah, I mean, you make a good point. They've also got a few pretty good players. They've got Deshaun. We had to deal with one Watt brother last week. Well, technically 2, and they've got to deal with another one this week. So, and honestly, watching last week's game, they fought in that game, and they fumbled on like the 1 or 2 yard line going in for the potentially game tying score. Against the Colts. So I don't know. I mean, this might be a pretty good game. This might be a pretty good matchup.
Oh, I think so too. I think like Vegas is projecting like a 2-score win for the Texans. It's probably going to be a little bit closer than that. I just look at their defense. Yeah, look at their defense, and it's literally just J.J. Watt. Justin Reed's out for the year. Bradley Roby was suspended with PEDs along with Will Fuller around the same time. So, it's just a bunch of nobodies, and Watt carrying that team. Funny you mentioned they faced 2 Watts last week. Everyone really forgot about how Derek Watt almost died on the fourth snap of the game when he ran down there on punt teams and walked off the field after suffering what looked like the biggest concussion of all time.
Yeah.
But that was kind of blown under the rug as the game progressed. But you mentioned winning on the road. Off the top of your head, do you remember the last time the Bengals did win on the road?
No idea.
It was against the Falcons in week 4 of 2018. So not only have they not won a road game, not only have they not won a road game in Zac Taylor's time, they lost the final 6 road games of that 2018 season. I mean, they finished 0-8 or 1-7 in the last 8 weeks, so it makes sense. But if they don't win this one, the time span is already over 800 days in total. It'll be well over 1,000 by the time the next time they get their chance. This game is monumental in that regard.
Yeah, that's crazy to even think about. Yes, I realized it was that deep into the Marvin Lewis era the last time. That was a great. That was the Tony McRae game, right? He blocked it, he blocked the field goal, and they called him offsides. And then I think it was crap though. I think he was actually good. And then he jumped offsides and the next one trying to block it again. I literally almost bought a Tony McRae jersey after that. That was incredible. Most guys get soft and it's oh well, I better make sure I don't jump off sides. Screw that. Go block the damn kick. You know what I mean? If you're not willing to risk that, you're never gonna block it. That was just such a ballsy move by him. I absolutely freaking loved it. Yeah, I mean that takes you back quite a ways. Now, so obviously you point out the kind of the juxtaposition, and actually I did an article this week. I happened to this wasn't even planned. After the Cowboys game, I did an article as Zac Taylor's pointed out. There's always a couple of plays that determine the outcome of a game, and that the Bengals don't make those plays in tight games. I pointed out the plays that could have turned around that Cowboys game. Obviously, it starts with the 3 turnovers, but even in the fourth quarter, they had a holding penalty on a score that would have brought it to within 1 touchdown. And the defense was actually playing pretty well. So they could have had a shot. Jeez, if they have Burrow in that game, and when you get into 2nd and 17, you don't still have to run the ball and run draws and crap. They should be able to score in that situation. And then I did the opposite article on the few plays that won the game for them against the Steelers. And as you pointed out, it's a completely different story with turnovers. I see a lot more good in this defense than most people do. All right, I'm picking my words very carefully here. I see a lot more good. I like some of the stuff that Anarumo does schematically. The big problem that I have with Lou Anarumo and his defense is they do not generate turnovers. You can be not very good on defense, but if you could figure out a way to steal some balls, especially when Joe Burrow is your quarterback, your team can figure out how to win, even though you're giving up some points if you're giving that guy more opportunities. So you see how it changes when they're able to do that. Now, Ben was playing poorly, and there are some things in there. It wasn't like they created all that, and the Cowboys didn't create all that either. The Bengals put the ball on the ground. But it is interesting to see how that turnover game really makes an impact, because I mean, like you said, I mean, there was 17 points. It was 17 points from turnovers for both games, I believe. Might have been more for over the Steelers game, but 17 damn points. And then the Cowboys the next week went out and scored 23 points off of turnovers and won their game that following week. So that was it for that team. That's why they won a couple games, because they were able to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I just thought back to those mid 2000s teams where you had Troy James and Delta O'Neal as your cornerbacks, and you get 20 interceptions a year, and the defense was not particularly great in terms of a snap basis, but it was just very opportunistic, and you were able to compete with that. And that's why the Bengals were successful with that high, powerful offense. And I think you deserve like a victory lap with Anarumo. I think you were one of the first to really stand by him, even when the results weren't exactly coming. I think it's important to differentiate the process with the results. And while everyone will look at the Bengals haven't faced really good offenses since Week 11, since Joe Burrow went down. You faced Washington, Colt McCoy Giants, Andy Dalton Cowboys, and then what we saw with Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers. The competition is not great, but I think the process is still kind of getting there. And as someone who has not defended Lou Anarumo in the slightest, I think he does deserve some semblance of credit for what he's done in recent weeks. And he's definitely probably earned that next opportunity to continue with this opportunity in 2021, unless like a Mike Zimmer becomes available, and the Bengals will probably jump on that. But yeah, I think regardless of the opposing competition, I think the process has shown solid results, and he's had like a very above average defense since Joe Burrow went down.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Anarumo is like I said, the turnovers really bug me, but I do think he's been able to think. I'm trying to think of the metaphor I created the other day, but like he's made lemonades out of lemons with what he has defensively. They don't have a real CB2. They don't have a pass rush. I would have thought they could scheme up more pass rush. That's disappointing as well.
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah. And I don't understand, because they do send Davis Gaither, they'll send Logan Wilson, they'll send Alexander and those guys, but it hasn't landed. So that bothers me. Although apparently that's Alec Golden's job. So so who knows who we can blame for that? But yeah, I think he's done that. But having said that, like I think he's done an admirable job of making things work and making things competitive this year, because I think this team could be much worse off if he wasn't able to do that. Having said that, can he, you give him the dudes, can he beat the Chiefs in the playoffs? Right. Can he beat the Bills? I don't know. Like, that's a huge jump. So to me, I have no problem. Like, and again, it's kind of my policy. I don't really talk about, like, I don't pitch for anybody to get fired. But if they fired him, I would understand it. I just think that I don't think you fire him for the results this year. I think you fire him kind of like you were saying, because you don't like where it's going and you don't think it's going to get where it needs to be. On that same note, we're going into this game now, and like I said, there's draft implications here. I think it's the Panthers, the Texans.
The Dolphins have the Texans pick, by the way.
Yeah. They do, but there's three teams that have 4 wins, and the Bengals obviously, they move in the draft behind the Texans by winning this game, at least for this week, and potentially those 2 other teams, and then I think that would tie them with the Eagles. So we'd have to figure out that tiebreaker. So they could go as far as like 7 just by winning this game. Mm-hmm. Now, what does this game mean? At the end of the day, and it doesn't, like, getting the road win, does it really mean that much? Winning a 4th game, does it really mean that much? To me, it's like it doesn't. But like you were saying, to me, it's the process. Like, if you can see some positive things out of Taylor and the staff and with the direction that things are going, to me, that's what it's about. It's not about winning for winning's sake, if that makes any sense. I mean, what do you think about, like, is there positive to getting this win?
Yeah, I think, ultimately the Texans might not be a very good football team. They're 4-6 after firing Bill O'Brien. They were 0-4 before firing Bill O'Brien. They've had guys get suspended, guys get injured, so they're not as good as they could be. But at the end of the day, they have an elite quarterback, and I think that if you compete or even win against a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, regardless of everything that else is happening with that team, I think it speaks volumes. It's the difference between beating a quarterback that, like the current version of Ben Roethlisberger, and a guy in Deshaun Watson who can just take a game over and just trample your defense regardless of what you do. It'll be a monumental test in trying to slow him down regardless of what receivers are out there. I think he has the capability to do all sorts of damage with both his arms and his legs. I remember like the first time they played him, it was his second career game, and like the only touchdown in the game was the 50-yard run from Deshaun Watson in that Thursday night. It was a game that got, I think, it got Kansas City fired because of like the second straight week they didn't have a touchdown. But it's Deshaun and JJ Watt. Those guys are just gonna be carrying those sides of the ball. And like you said, to be able to do it for 2 straight weeks, right? It's not just win on the road. This would be the first time they've won 2 straight games in Zac Taylor's time as head coach. So a win, like you said, it puts them at 4 wins. It still puts the season as a failure, and it's just 1 road win. It's below the expectation, but it's showing signs of progress, and I think that should count for something.
Yeah, I mean, like again, I think it's always. I get draft position, right? But it's better to win than not to win. And I think that there's some chatter of, well, if they lose all these games, Zac Taylor get fired. I don't think he's getting fired. I don't think he was ever getting fired. I don't know. Like as late as he came in, and I'm not defending this stance, but as late as he came in, and they just signed their free agents that year because the coaches that came in didn't even have a chance to evaluate the guys. Preston Brown, John Mill, like these guys being examples. They just re-signed the guys they had that weren't good, and the new staff wasn't going to like it in the long run. So again, not defending this, but I wonder if the organization sees year 1 as a wash. Like, I wonder if they give that to him almost. Even more so than this year, you look at it and you say, well, if they had Burrow, they would have won some more games. Like I think you might even look at that more and say, well, they didn't have a chance to really evaluate anything coming in.
2 things with that. One, like the Burrow angle, it doesn't bug me, but I think people are misinterpreting it. If all the success, the improvements are based around Joe Burrow, it doesn't really say anything positive about Zac Taylor, in my opinion, because once Burrow went down,
hire Martindale and get the defense right there. And if Burrow's running your goddamn offense, then hire a defensive coordinator to run your team.
And that's a whole other thing, right? Like, how much does Taylor get credit for building an offense when it was basically all a 23-year-old rookie's fault or because of him? So that's one thing that I think people still kind of miss. The other is kind of escaping my mind at the moment. I've completely lost my train of thought, so I'm going to return it back to you.
My bad. I interrupted you there. So
no, I was thinking of something, but it came after that. But whatever.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of the things that bugged me about Taylor too. He said this maybe last year. Like he actually said, like when looking at their red zone performance, he said that in the red zone it comes down to like the quarterback making plays a lot, and that bugs the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing it, and honestly, like people don't like him in press conferences. I really feel like he puts most things on himself, and like, I got to call some better plays. The offense is to be better. Whenever he says the offense is to be better, it's really, that's essentially him. But that one looks like such a weird departure. And even if it's true, you shouldn't say it. You know what I mean? Like even if it's true, like maybe they've done research and statistically it's like, maybe you win on the second play, that the quarterback creates. I don't know. But you shouldn't say it. You got to own it. You got to take accountability for it. And that's been a problem that's persisted this year with Joe Burrow at the helm, that they haven't been able to capitalize all the time when they get down there. So, yeah, I mean, you gotta put it on yourself at that point. Really with everything. I mean, at the end of the day, everything comes down to the head coach. Like I like sometimes it bugs me when they blame Taylor for certain things, but I think it's just that we're blaming him for the wrong things. There's plenty to blame him for. There's plenty of reason to be mad at him. But sometimes it's like, all right, well, don't get mad about that. There's plenty else to be mad about.
Yeah, and I think at least Jesse of All Bengals came out and said that there will be, or no, it was Tyler Dragon of the Inquirer said that there will be at least one coaching change on this staff, and I think we can all just assume it's probably going to be Jim Turner at this point. And there was some debate about, whether or not he would, like Zach would want to protect him from getting axed, but maybe it's just the front office kind of coming down and just making that decision for them because of how well Anarumo has improved. But I want to go back to like what you said about year one being a wash. And I remember when Zac Taylor was hired, like Brian Flores was hired at the exact same time, and people clowned that hire because it was just another Bill Belichick assistant. And then this offseason, it was, oh, why would Joe Burrow want to go to play for the Dolphins? Like, why are the Bengals being touted as this desolate wasteland for quarterbacks? Why would he want to go play for the Dolphins? And now Brian Flores in year two has the Dolphins knocking on the door of the playoffs. It seems very weak,
and not even with Tua for most of the season.
Exactly. He's pulling quarterbacks in the bullpen and having to make no look passes, in the final 30 seconds of the game. But it just seems weak for the Bengals to use like that like train of thought when there's another team who had the exact same timeline, who had the exact same past 2 off seasons, getting it done and getting results. And then I brought this up, and then people were like, "Oh, well, the Dolphins have a GM." Well, if your coach can't succeed without a GM like Marvin Lewis does, is he really like a GM is not coming to Cincinnati? That's not a solution that's possible, not with the current crop of ownership. So if it's not this staff, then it needs to be another staff.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I've I push for college guys a lot. That's that would be something that would make sense. If you hired a Lincoln Riley, I don't think he took that job, especially before you had Joe Burrow. But if you hire a Lincoln Riley or you hire an Urban Meyer or somebody who understands the recruiting aspect and that type of evaluation, I think those guys, maybe they don't understand the money of it, but they're to be better suited for a GM type of role than an assistant from any NFL team is, just because of that background. I think they're better suited to be able to do that. But you make a great point, and I think we also get caught up in like Eric Bieniemy. Like there's a big debate about whether or not he calls plays or how often he calls plays. I mean, that just goes to show you, like Flores was the defensive play caller, and they didn't even name him the defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Like these things don't really matter. A lot of them don't. Play calling, I think, for an offensive guy does to some extent because Zac Taylor's calling the offense, but you don't see much of defensive minded coaches actually calling the defense. When you get into that role. So I mean, it just goes to show you we don't what we look at and what we value in head coach prospects doesn't really work out in the long run most of the time anyway.
And this is going to be Bieniemy's like 3rd year in the cycle, and he might still not have a job. Now there's reports about like Mike Kafka, who's the passing coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. He could get like a head coaching job. If he gets a job before Bieniemy, I think that just says all you need to know about what the NFL thinks about Bieniemy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have some thoughts about that, but it's funny that Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy apparently interview just fine, but Eric Bieniemy doesn't.
It's
what's the difference?
Yeah.
But we'll move on from that quickly. So hey, here's another thing. There's been a lot of talk. Look, we're talking about the draft, and we're talking about Penny is the guy we target. Obviously, guard is a huge need. There's been a lot of talk, and there's some chatter this morning on Twitter about Joe Thuney. What are your thoughts on that? Look, like the player is great, but to me, the Bengals have been criticized in the past for not valuing the guard position. But I wonder how much of that's fair because we criticize them for not having a fully staffed analytics department, and I believe you'd be hard pressed to find somebody at PFF that wouldn't say take a tackle, not a guard, and put your best player at tackle, not a guard, even if he's better at guard. I had that very conversation with Austin Gale this offseason, about Quentin Nelson, that they'd be better suited to put him at left tackle or at tackle, even if he's not as good as he is at guard, just because of the value of the position. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on not just the player, but at what the likely price tag is?
I think this goes back to process over results again, because, think back to like the early 2000s. The Bengals spent 3 first-round picks on cornerbacks. That's a smart process. That's a position that you want to invest high draft capital in. And they didn't always work out. You know, you can look at Drake Kirkpatrick and Darqueze Dennard, but then William Jackson worked out, and he's probably going to get paid this offseason anyways.
And they didn't need any of those guys either, by the way. Like they had like Terrence Newman, they had Pac-Man, like they had some aging but good players. It wasn't they weren't pushing the need, they were pushing the player.
And then ever since, like, you know, for the past 10 years, it's been offensive linemen and linebackers that they've just whiffed and whiffed and whiffed and whiffed. And then the natural response is overcompensate for those whiffs, you know, invest in, you know, high price free agents, high draft picks to just solve the problem. But in the end of the day, like guards and linebackers, they're not exactly valuable players, and they shouldn't. And it's not wise to invest a lot of money into those positions. But then the thought is just throw a bunch of money at it, just get it fixed, and you can solve the other problems. So I think the Bengals, they have the right process in terms of not overspending at linebacker, not overspending at guard. They just need good players, and they've consistently failed to bring those in, even though the process I think is right. So like a guy, like a signing like Xavier Su'a-Filo, if Su'a-Filo is a solid player, that's a solid signing because it just fills a spot for low cost, and he's not going to light the world on fire, but he's not exactly going to just hinder you. And that yeah, and that's assuming that Su'a-Filo is a good player, and we don't really know that as of yet. He hasn't really played that much this season. But like for Thuney, that's going to cost you $15 million a year, but you know Thuney is going to be a good player. Or Thuney, I'm not sure how to say his name, but we know that Thuney. Yeah, he grew up around Cincinnati. I think he went to Dayton. Apparently, the Bengals liked him coming out of that draft in 2016. It would make sense for those two to you know join together, but the Bengals have never spent that much money at that position, and it's just hard to expect them to do it now when they also have a need to tackle, and the free agent class at tackle is better than the free agent class at guard. If I were to guess, they would probably rather spend it at tackle because then you don't go into the draft needing to take a Penei Sewell if you don't even know that you're going to be able to get him, or you have so many options to trade down and take another tackle. I think they would want to solve both of those issues in free agency, but if I were to guess at which spot is going to get the heavy money, it's probably going to be a tackle.
Yeah, that's true. And it is kind of interesting to think about. And I don't know, like maybe since we're making up for missed opportunities, like if you draft Penei Sewell and you spend a bunch of money, you know, on whatever guard in free agency, it kind of works out that like the total cap, well, not including draft cap, but the total money you're spending on the offensive line, that when you get to the point where you're going to have to pay Jonah and Penei not long after, you're moving on from that guard. You know what I mean? So you can kind of balance out the money that way. It's a weird investment of capital because you're not really investing. What are you looking at, dude? You're investing the most money in the right spot, but it kind of balances out a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you, and I think you know to some extent it makes sense. We also have to look at if you know the likely coaching change that we've heard about. You know, people believe it's Jim Turner. If it's Jim Turner, number one, expect more out of Jonah, right? If you're gonna bring in a dude like Jonah is very good and has had limited opportunities. Maybe he takes this next step. Maybe he is the left tackle we think he can be, and maybe some of these other guys develop a little bit. You know, not that you shouldn't invest in the position at all, but I mean in terms of the guard, like. Maybe Michael Jordan will be all right in the long run. Maybe the plethora of other guys they have in the interior, they can work with those guys a little bit more. I think Xavier Su'a-Filo was a good move because it prevented them from having to draft a guard. Like, you know, like maybe they don't draft Logan Wilson if they didn't pick up Xavier Su'a-Filo. Obviously, it didn't work out that they didn't have him at the beginning of the year, but you know maybe that frees them up. Because to me, in free agency, you should address all of your needs to at least a minimal amount, so you don't have to take the next step. And if you look at tackle for the Bengals, it's already been addressed to a minimal amount because Bobby Hart, you can get by, you know, so like that prevents you from having to reach on an offensive tackle, assuming some other things work out. And Bobby Hart's coach, you know, maybe he has a different coach in there. So I don't know. I think that was a pretty good move because it was good money, and I think it's a guy you can plug in. Problem is, I've been having way too many plug-in players, you know, and then what happens when he goes down? we end up juggling the guard position for 3 weeks trying to find out who can play it, and then trading for a bunch, trading for guys and picking up guys.
Yeah, and the Quinn Spain kind of falls in the same line. It would be looked as a better signing if they had a better offensive line. If you're looking at Quinn Spain is like your savior to fix one of the spots. You're just kind of hoping for too much, but it wouldn't hurt to bring him back and see what he can do. Like at the end of the day, they need at least 2 new starters, one at right tackle, one at one of the guard spots at minimum. Preferably, you would get 2 new starters, and you would find a way to get those guys, whether it be in free agency or in the draft. So at the end of the day, they need at least 40% of an overhaul and keep, Trey and Jonah where they are, or maybe move Jonah around. It'll all depend on where the offensive line coach will want him. But they need 2 new guys, and I would prefer them to use smart process in acquiring those guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you on that. I mean, we've talked about this before, but like Trey Hopkins is a guy who's good, but last year he was the best lineman on the team, and that can't happen. And right now he's the best lineman of the team with Jonah out, and that can't happen. He needs to be like number 4, number 5.
Exactly.
Like, worst guy. If we're sitting here being like, hey, maybe they should draft a center, we can replace him and upgrade. Like if that's a conversation we're having, they probably have a pretty damn good offensive line. I mean, I think we get caught in that a lot, where our expectations versus what players really are. Uzama, Hubbard, like these are guys that I think people sometimes get really excited about, and it's like, yeah, they're pretty good and they can play a role, but let's not go crazy about them. To me, like a lot of people would talk about Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Florida. Kyle Pitts would be incredible. There's a couple things I look at. I don't know, because we haven't seen in the past how they value a tight end like that, how they would use a tight end like that. And the other thing is they're just fine. Like they're fine at that position with what they have. But again, that's how you get to be really good. You draft guys to make you excellent, not guys to get you by. Which comes with having the guys that get you by in the first place. So you're not pushing at every single position. I mean, that's to me, that's why the draft is all about
it's supplementing talent. It's not relying on it.
And like Marino and Krabs have the show Draft Dudes, and draft is the type of dudes they are. But to me, like draft should be a verb, like draft dudes. Don't tell me not to draft a running back. Don't tell me to draft a tackle. Just draft dudes. That's all you got to worry about. And at the end of the day, if you have enough time, things are going to work out if you just draft the best players, the dudes.
Speaking of supplementing talent, we're like the supplements on this show, and Anthony Cosenza is the real meat of it all. He's the guy who carries everything, and he's joining us here. Anthony, what's going on, man?
I'm just the guy behind the guys. How are you guys? You doing well today?
Mm-hmm. Good. No video. You had the flooding last week. You got some Wi-Fi issues going on?
Yeah, I hopped in earlier. There was kind of some bugginess going with the audio, so I had to hop back out and tweak some things. So just to not muddy the waters, as I tend to do on these pregame shows, just thought maybe eliminating video, and so you guys don't have to see my beautiful face for the last half of the show. I thought that may make things a little bit more smoothly. But hope you guys had a good Christmas and everything. And how you guys feeling about today?
I don't know, man. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, it really could go any direction. We were talking, like, they played the Colts pretty tightly last week. Obviously, the Bengals beat the Steelers. But yeah, how do they ride this? Can they take the next step? Can they get 2 games in a row? Can they win on the road? On a short week on the road too, so you got the travel that you're losing, plus you've got the not having the Monday night.
I think John and I briefly touched on this, and this is something I've been thinking about kind of this week is, what happens if, and how do we feel if all of a sudden, they beat the Steelers in primetime, Zac Taylor gets his first road win, and then they knock out the Ravens, and they just kind of go on this little streak to end the season. And then you're getting Burrow back. I don't know. Does that just alter the perception? Do we know what we already know? I don't know. Obviously I could be sitting here 4 hours from now and look like a complete idiot for even bringing this up. But, I guess it's just something that came to my mind. I'm like, how do we view this season if they go on a little run like this, and some of the issues that we've been worried about kind of end up being remedied a little bit towards the end of the year.
Paul Dehner Jr. did an article on this week where he talked about in the 90s, some of the times that they had some upset wins at the end of the season, did some things well at the end of the season, and it never carried over. But John and I were talking about this earlier. Like, it's more about the process. So, like, you can beat the Steelers, and in a vacuum, does it mean much? I don't know. But to your point, if they beat the Steelers, win a winnable game in between, and then beat the Ravens a couple weeks later, maybe that means something. Like, if you could pull off both those, because the Ravens are still going to be playing for a playoff position at that time too. Maybe putting together a couple of those, I don't know, maybe it means something. What do you think, John?
I think it would be the liveliest dead cat bounce of all time. Like, I mean, people have experienced it more often than I have. I don't really remember all that stuff back in the late 90s. I was just an infant. But 3 straight wins against the Steelers, on the road against Deshaun Watson, and then to close out and potentially end the Ravens' playoff chances, it would be nothing short of impressive. And there is still an argument that Zac is who he is and this coaching staff is what it is, but it's something that you can't ignore. And obviously he would 100% be back with most of his staff if that would happen. But yeah, it may end up being nothing, but I think at that point it would be worth to see if something has actually turned the corner, something has actually changed.
Yeah, I mean
that's the argument in that, like, you mentioned about the staff. I don't know how much these last couple of weeks. Maybe it means something for Lou Anarumo. Maybe it means something for Jim Turner. But like I said, I really don't think that these last few weeks mean anything for Zac Taylor. I think he was coming back all along. And that was kind of part of the implication of the article was like, well, then Cosler came back and look what happened.
Right.
And I don't think that's apples to apples. By the way, Jason Von Steen here. Von Steen. Sorry, I'm probably one of those is right, probably. Supplements would be a great band name, which means a lot coming from this guy because, first of all, like the name and the look, I bet this guy shreds the freaking guitar.
Oh yeah, he's made music for our show, Matt. He's
no kidding?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
I
he does a lot of.
Clearly,
Yeah,
I know your work.
Yeah, he does. He's a musician. I think also, by the
We
way,
compliment on that stuff all the time. By the way, like all the time on YouTube, it's like, oh man, I'm vibing to this thing.
I think Jason is in the Tennessee, maybe Nashville area. So I hope he and all of his friends and family and everything are safe, given what happened this last couple of days here. But yeah, he's a musician, man, and he's been really good to our show. So good guy.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching and thanks for contributing as well. And we've knocked the Ravens out of the playoffs before, and it feels good, but it doesn't always pan out. Yeah, I don't know. Like I think Anthony makes a good point though. Like, I don't know, maybe if you pull those things together, maybe it means something. Where beating the Steelers when Ben's having a bad night isn't necessarily anything. And that's the thing. Like, that's why I think these games matter at the end of the day too, is because Washington, Giants, probably the Cowboys, and the Texans, like, but Joe Burrow, you should win those games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you will, because there's plenty of games in the first half of the year that you should have won that you didn't, but you should win those games. So, I mean, I think even though the Texans aren't great,
so I guess
with Ryan Finley.
Yeah, I guess where I was going, Matt, to your point when you were talking about, some of those seasons where, they ended on a good run and LeBeau came back, Coslet came back, all these things. What happened was, they would come back but the quarterback position was still unsettled at the time, the following year. So I kind of think, well, if Zac rattles off these 3 wins, maybe there's a bit of fool's gold there. But if you couple that with Burrow, yeah, he's got the injury, but Burrow coming back the following year, maybe then you've kind of got a little something different in the mix than, these other occasions that were brought to light this week. I don't know. Again, I could, a few hours from now, I could look like a total idiot for even bringing up this conversation topic up, but I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that because I was thinking about that this morning.
The Burrow return is another aspect of this because there are, as Matt said earlier in the show, there are baked in excuses for Zac Taylor's first 2 years not exactly going to plan. And if Burrow has a minor setback with his recovery, or he just doesn't look the same, or he failed, or he missed the opportunity to progress from year 1 to 2 because he was so focused on rehab, that's yet another excuse that can be added to Taylor's resume. And I think it's best for us to just establish now that that can't be an excuse. If he finishes year 3 with yet again underwhelming performances, and Burrow is because of that, I think it's dangerous, and that could give him like year 4 if Burrow doesn't look 100% or he just looks the same. And I'm just saying right now that cannot be the case.
You can't depend on your quarterback to win every freaking game for you either. You know,
Exactly.
like at some point, I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes or you're Tom Brady or whoever you are. Like at some point, you're gonna meet your match. You're gonna have a bad day. They're gonna beat you on scheme or something and figure something out about you, and you're gonna need the defense to step up, or you're gonna need to be able to run the ball. Like you need to be flexible as a team. It can't be all about one guy. And I've said multiple times, I think Zac Taylor was always going to have a job in 2021. But personally, like I see this year as an opportunity. Like if I was if I was if I owned the Bengals, I would look at this and I would say these few weeks without Burrow are an opportunity for Zac Taylor to prove, like to earn the right to coach Joe Burrow in year 2. Because if you can't beat the Texans, with Ryan Finley, why do I think you're ever going to be able to beat Patrick Mahomes? You know what I mean? Like, and Andy Reid, like just because of Burrow, like it's not enough. Like you got to be able to do more. So, and you look at like the history of the NFL and like of football. You look at the resourcefulness, like offenses that new offenses that develop, like the spread when the spread and the zone read became really big. It wasn't at big colleges. It was at Utah. It was at West Virginia. It was coaches who were figuring out a way to beat teams they shouldn't beat with inferior talent. And then, Urban goes from Utah to Florida and to Ohio State, and he can win championships now because he has the talent plus the scheme. So, like, that's the same sort of thing for me. Like, you got to show that you have the scheme to win games without Joe Burrow, nothing throwaway games, without Joe Burrow. Or why do I think that you can build a franchise and win multiple Super Bowls with him? Like, you're not the guy if you can't figure out how to win a few games with Ryan Finley or Brandon Allen at quarterback.
That's a good point. And just kind of to add on to that, Matt, I would say that, especially as the Bengals potentially try and build this thing with Burrow over the next couple of years, if they do make it to the playoffs, there's a high likelihood that they would be going on the road and facing some of these guys. So it's not only just beating these guys, it would be, a Mahomes, a Watson, whoever. It would be potentially beating them in their own stadium, which is, difficult enough as it is. So you're right. They need to, while Burrow's a big key to everything, they need to bolster other areas for sure.
Also, along with what Matt said, and he said this earlier too, the standard should be competing against Mahomes. He's not going anywhere for another 9 years in Kansas City. Like, it's always, how do you win the AFC North? How do you compete against the AFC North teams? Like, the AFC North teams, they have to be worried about the Chiefs too. If you can't beat the Chiefs, you're not going to the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is the ultimate goal. If you can find a way to compete with the Chiefs, you can beat practically anybody. So that should be the standard.
Well, look what the Chiefs did. The Chiefs lost to the Chiefs lost to the Patriots in the playoffs. And what did they do? They went out and hired the defensive coordinator that beat them in the Super Bowl twice with the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what the Chiefs did. Like, obviously the Patriots aren't the Patriots this year, but like they were like, we got to figure out how to beat the Patriots. Obviously you need to figure out how to beat the Ravens too, because to Anthony's point, you got to win the AFC North, or you're never gonna have a home playoff game, which would certainly help things. But yeah, it's about winning the big game. It's about winning the Super Bowl. That brings us to an interesting point here. So we were talking about the draft and possible draft implications. Obviously, Penny is a big guy we're talking about right now. I had a thought, and I just want to put this out there. I've been adamant, and I've put out a lot of mock drafts where I just like go hard on O line and D line, because to me it's like you need O line and D line, like those things have to be fixed, or nothing else really matters. But there's a large contingent of people who, even sitting at 3, there are people that would take Jamar Chase. Gives you the speed component you don't have, gives you another weapon for Burrow. I mean, do we think that O-line, D-line has to be like the top priority, or do we think we can spread around, some of the love a little bit and be able to invest and get some playmakers like that in the mix?
Well, Matt, is he a dude?
He is a dude.
He is a dude. He hasn't played in a little bit, but he is a dude.
Draft dudes, baby, draft dudes.
Well, just for me, I would say, I mean, I like those skill position guys, and I would, I would be tempted to take a guy like that. But if you're going to take him at 3, Chase, or maybe one of even the Alabama receivers, what have you, you have to be pretty confident that you're getting an AJ Green type of talent, and a guy that can come in and give you, I would say 10 years like AJ Green did, but maybe more 6 or 7 years like AJ Green did, given the injuries. So if you're going to draft that position at number 3, you better be pretty dang confident that that's what you're going to get out of a guy like that. Otherwise, I think we all know that protecting the passer and rushing the opposition's passer, it's a big key in the league for sure.
And I think, honestly, if it's not best case scenario, it should be one that's promising to a lot of fans. If people think that it's Lawrence and Sewell, like those are the top tier guys, those are the only guys that are worth a top 5 pick. If those guys are gone, Bengals picking 3, trade down. Like if you don't have a guy that you think is worth it there, get multiple guys who are worth, in the 10 to 50 range. That's the way to succeed. If you don't get one of those guys that are worth, because he's right. Like if you don't pick a player, if you pick a player in the top 5 who you don't think is worth that top 5 pick, then trade down is always the better option.
Yeah, and I think I don't know how comfortable people would be with this, but the other thing about trading down is the farther you go, the more you can get. And we look at the Mahomes Watson trades, like, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe in both those cases they picked up a first round pick the following year too.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at this thing long term, I mean, not that I want to do business with the Steelers, and not that this is the sort of thing they do anyway, but maybe the Steelers are in love with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, and we're sitting there, like, are you willing to trade back to the 20s, pick up another first round pick the next year in addition to some other things? Like there's some value to doing that, and that's like at that pick, there's a lot of value. All it takes is one person falling in love with the quarterback, and there might be the Eagles might be right behind the Bengals. I mean, maybe they're not moving on from Hurts, but like there could be some teams that they're going to want a quarterback at that spot. So I don't know. I mean, would you be? What kind of trade are we talking about here? Is what I'm trying to say. Like, are we willing to make a big move for long-term returns and be willing to deal with it this year?
There's logic to both. Part of me says, there's still a lot of roster holes and there's still a lot of areas that need to be addressed on this team. But this team traditionally has liked to move back, collect picks, and they take lesser players. And a lot of times they prefer quantity over quality in the draft. And I'm just kind of like, you got the high picks. Maybe you stay put where you're at the first 2 rounds, and then maybe you look to move back in rounds 3 or 4 to kind of round out some other areas. But I don't know. There's a logical argument to either. I guess I'd like to see them take the quality over quantity, because they sometimes like to prefer the latter, it seems, in the draft.
Oh, for sure. Like they haven't traded down from that high in the draft since I think Dave Klinger. So they've had top 10 picks in recent years, and they always stand pat. And like Matt said, all it takes is one offer to really blow them away. But until they do it, I think the expectation is that they're probably going to stay put.
Yeah, and I would say to kind of Anthony's point, like if you're in love with Penny, if you're in love with with Chase, like draft dudes. Like if there's a guy there, flip and take the guy. And if you feel good about it, like take the guy. But yeah, don't force it. And I think, like when people do their draft boards, like they might have 20 first round grades, like just because it's a top 10 grade, like maybe you have 3 top 5 grades and you end up picking 4th and those 3 guys are gone. I mean, that's a case where you probably want to trade. Maybe you don't want to trade that far out because you feel pretty good about your, the amount of people you have as top 10 grades or something like that. But I think you move. And I think it's interesting too, because what's this year going to be like? It's like Penny is a great example. I have a lot of questions about Penny. I wish he played football this year. I have a lot of questions about drafting a guy that hasn't played football in a year. In general, I see the potential for that guy, absolutely, but there's a lot of question marks there. And now you're dealing with these Big Ten guys that have only played a handful of games this year. The Bengals might actually be in a little bit better of a position than others because they watch more film and travel a little less. That's an exaggeration, but because they don't necessarily have boots on the ground constantly at every single team in the NCAA. Because of COVID, nobody's doing that, so maybe they have a little bit of advantage in that situation. But it's going to be a weird year, and if you don't feel confident in your evaluation because the year hasn't allowed you to make to get as much contact, punt it, like punt the pick to next year. Like I love what the Patriots do, and the Patriots don't like a guy like on day 3. They trade day 3 picks for day 3 picks next year all the time because it's like, well, we're not doing anything out of that. We'll do that, and they'll use it as draft capital or whatever to trade it half the time. But I don't know. We're getting close to kickoff here. About 7 minutes to go. What do we think? Do we want to do predictions? Do we feel good about anything right now? I mean, like confident about anything right now?
Whatever I say, it's probably gonna be wrong. So I'm hoping for an intriguing game. I want Deshaun to do well because I love Deshaun Watson, but I think the Bengals will keep this close because the Texans are just not very impressive outside of him.
I'd like to say outright the Bengals win just to kind of feel positive and everything, and I think they have a very good chance to. I worry about the short week. I worry about the emotions that they showed. Are they pretty drained this week after taking on the Steelers? I don't know. I guess I'll be positive and I'll say Bengals maybe squeak one out, maybe a 20-17 or 23-20, something like that. But, I wouldn't be surprised if it fell the other way, though, too. I do think it'll be close.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be a close game. Like we talked about, you get the short week for the Bengals, you get the travel week for the Bengals. So we'll be interested, and it's a short week. Plus, they probably got a little bit of time off on Thursday and stuff, and so it's a weird week too, with the holiday right, really at the end of it, kind of in peak practice time on Thursday, for the eve there and stuff. So, I don't know. I think they can. I think they can get the win here, and it would be good to at least be able to say that they can win on the road and not have that monkey on your back because there's so many other monkeys on their back going into next year. So I'm gonna go with Anthony's "Hey, what if we win 3 weeks in a row?" idea and say, yeah, sure. Let's ride this. Let's call it a close win. Winning a 1-score game on the road. That's what I'm saying. Because why the hell not? Any last minute thoughts? I'm going to put up some score predictions from some of the listeners here.
Yeah, Allen is back. I think he's going to be starting because he practiced at the end of this week. So that might make it closer because I don't think Ryan Finley can put together 2 straight good games.
Yeah, I just want to say go check out, for those especially who check out our YouTube channel, go check out the recent videos that both John and Matt did this week. John's Weekly Lineman, and of course Matt doing some good stuff on his Chalk Talk. So go check that stuff out.
All right, and then come on back and check out Anthony after the game. So win, lose, or what the hell was that? Anthony will be here talking about it.
Great
Unfortunately,
tagline. It's a great tagline.
what the hell was
Probably
that?
the last one.
But
Probably the latter, right?
so come on back and check that out, and we'll be pumping out some stuff this week. I mean, final stretch, but we'll have some good stuff prepping you for the Ravens game throughout the week as well. So make sure you're checking out all that stuff. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I don't know what you say about Kwanzaa, but whatever, whatever you got. Hope you're having a good one. Hope you and yours and your family and everything are safe and enjoying yourselves. And hopefully you didn't have to spend it all alone. So for Anthony and John, we'll see you after the game.
2 more games to go.
2 more.
See you guys.